entertainer, first and foremost, but there's art involved here. And an artist has an obligation to be en route, to be going somewhere. There's a journey involved here, and you don't know where it is, and that's the fun. So you're always going to be seeking and looking and going and trying to challenge yourself. So without sitting around thinking of that a lot, it drives you and it keeps you trying to be fresh, trying to be new, trying to call on yourself a little more, you know.
And willing to put up with the grueling promotional schedule and everything else. So you've got
the only way.
Picasso never had to do morning shows in Albuquerque,
right?
You know.
And the only way I can do this is to go where the people are. They will not come to my house. We've offered bus rides and everything. They will not come. I have to go to Stevens Point, Wisconsin, or wherever it is. And the audiences are great, and they buy the tickets ahead of time, and they really wait for you to come there and see it. In the theaters and concert halls, it's special, because the audience, they do it beforehand, and you're the whole evening. In Las Vegas, you're an afterthought. You're an also. Well, we could go gambling, we could go hookering, we could get drunk, we could go to the convention. No, let's go see this guy. And if they like you, they do, but they're not committed fans. So it's a different tone there. But it still works. You can still do some things there that you can feel good about, you know.
Welcome back to the channel. For anyone who's new that's just stumbled across this or is finding it because of our guest this week, which is George Carlin, what we do here is I find a different clip from the internet, and then we discuss how Ohm's law of resistance applies to what this person is describing, because it is the belief of the people that created this channel that the law of energy is influencing every aspect of our life, and we use these videos to demonstrate how. So once again, we have Chris with us here today.
Hello.
Big Carlin fan?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Who isn't?
Love George Carlin.
So we're going to now play the clip, and we're going to discuss how it relates to energy law.
Well, I knew I wanted to stand up and, you know, and be silly and have people say, isn't he cute? Isn't he cute and clever? And that's all it was a reward, a psychic reward, you know, when you're a kid and you find out that you can get the attention of adults and approval and a little bit of respect, and you just hunger for it, you keep going back for it. And I have, fortunately, genetic, you know, my little toolkit, my genetic toolkit I was given included a mother and father who were very funny people, could do accents and dialects and tell funny stories about what happened on the bus that morning and have a punchline. So you don't lick it off the rocks, they say in Ireland. So I thank my grandmother's milkman, actually, which might have had. You never know where these things go.
No, you can never tell.
My mother cared a lot about language, and my father was a champion public speaker of 1935. He won the Mahogany Gavel over 800 other public speakers from the Dale Carnegie Public Speaking Institute, and he was great. I never knew him either.
Wow, that's something. Were your parents put off by the direction that you went into when you started to go counterculture? Was it a difficult transition for them to watch?
Well, he was out of the picture. He was brilliant, and he was a top salesman in advertising, but he couldn't metabolize ethanol efficiently. So he was given his hat. My mother was very brave. She left him. I was 2 months old, and my brother was 5 years, and she left down a fire escape. So he was gone. My mother was very kind of controlling, wanted to control my life, and was heartbroken when I began with the dirty language and the awful stuff he says about business. She was an advertising executive secretary, loved the business world, thought it was just the finest thing that ever happened. And the nuns, she would see the nuns in the street, and they would say, "Oh, we saw George on the Tonight Show," and she, being a bit of an actress, she would say, "Oh, it's the awful language, sister, the awful language." And one of them said to her, No, you don't understand. He's using it for other purposes. He's not just doing it for that. It's kind of like part of what he does. Don't you understand? It's this and that and so forth. So she said, oh. And from that day on, she was okay with it because the church had approved it. So that was that. That's how that worked.
People who deal in content that's on the edge as you do oftentimes live a life that's similarly on an edge. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people go off the rails.
Yeah.
And we lose them and their talent. And you've been able to not do that and been able to pull it back in and...
Another luck stroke. You know, you got to have luck in this world. Part of it's your genetic makeup, that's luck. And then what you do with it is also partly genetic. because hard work is genetic. The desire to do hard work, the willingness to work hard and be determined and not be turned aside, that's all genetic too. It can be altered and a little reinforced, but some of the people who had so much edgy promise, they died young. There's a degree of luck and intellect involved in giving up things that hurt you. The drug and alcohol thing, it seems to me, comes down to this. Drugs and these things are wonderful. They're wonderful when you try them first. They're not around for all these millennia for no reason. First time, mostly pleasure, very little pain, maybe a hangover. And as you increase and keep using whatever it is, the pleasure part decreases and the pain part, the price you pay, increases until the balance is completely the other way and it's almost all pain and there's hardly any pleasure. At that point, you would hope, then the intellect says, oh, this doesn't work anymore. I'm going to die, and I'll do something. But you need people around you who can help you, and you need something to live for. You have to have something to look forward to bring you out of it. You know, there are a lot of people who don't have a lot to live for, and most of the things we use don't let you leave them alone.
I just find the use that George Carlin, the wording he uses as he's talking there, he knew he wanted to have people's attention.
The approval of adults.
And eventually from everyone. It's like a psychic reward. I just found that so interesting that immediately he starts off and we're already seeing these compulsions that the Bradshaw talks about. And in this case, that compulsion was wanting to be in that spotlight.
Well, and it's perfect from that standpoint, too. If you've got an absentee father, you've got a controlling mother, all by his own admission, and then you've got this glorification of this absent father through all of the father's achievements that he's talking about. And even though he didn't know him, he just kind of has glorified this man who basically was an alcoholic. And then you just see the genuine pain on his face when he's talking about his father that he never knew. And then you just see how that goes on to affect the whole rest of his life, just like Bradshaw describes.
Words are just interesting in the way people use them, but he calls it the genetic toolkit. And I think the word genetic isn't the right word to use there. But he's talking about his dad, and he's like, "Oh, look, there's this genetic toolkit, and somehow or other, I got it from my parents." And I'm like, "Well, I guess sort of, except it's more like you picked up their behaviors, not their genetics. And your dad was compulsive, with narcissistic tendencies, but as far as wanting to be the center of attention and being a public speaker, that's part of the allure of that, and part of the reason some people can do it is because they enjoy that. And so his father already had those compulsive tendencies, and he was an alcoholic, which is another compulsion. And it got passed on to the children, or in this case, George Carlin, who picked up that tendency to want to be the center of attention and to be an alcoholic. He got all of that, but that was all learned compulsion from his parents. It wasn't genetic.
Well, especially you got the controlling mother who wants to control every aspect of your life. So what does he do? He ends up becoming the classic rebel, and then he just turns that into a whole career. So you've got the compulsivity to perform, you've got the alcoholic creative crazy. And it's fascinating just to see how much he was molded by that environment once you understand the Bradshaw aspect of it.
When they're talking about how so many people that work on the edge, with in terms of the comedians and stuff, and how so many of them succumb to alcoholism and drug abuse, and George Carlin says, well, yeah, but there's also this there's a luck aspect. And sometimes, it takes this ability for hard work. I think what he's talking about there is just the switching of compulsions. Now we've talked about how there's very harmful compulsions and then there's less harmful compulsions. So you can remove the compulsion of alcoholism from your life and replace it with the compulsion of being a workaholic. Right? And so I think that's maybe where he's talking there, where it's like, well, there's a point where you've got to find compulsions that work better for your life. So in George Carlin's case, by the sound of it, it was more of a, he was able to defeat alcoholism by focusing more on the compulsion of hard work and maybe overworking, possibly. I mean, I don't know his exact circumstances, but I know in my own life, as you're juggling different compulsions, you can have a compulsion to maybe spend too much time in social media, or you can change that compulsion to something else, like perhaps reading books, which is good to do. At the same time, it's still a compulsion. It's just a less destructive one. And it's one that maybe makes you better at reading and it exercises your mind a bit, but still a compulsion.
Well, and that's what I saw of myself in him, is that what he says is the whole process he describes of becoming an addict, how these things haven't existed for all these years for no reason, because the beginning, it's mostly pleasure, very little pain, and the more you use, the less pleasure there is, and the more pain there is. So what he's actually describing is the potential constant reality. So when you're in a heightened drug state, if potential is constant, resistance decreases, current increases. So by taking the drugs, you're reducing all of the mental resistance, and then you have all the energy to do the things that you want to do. But the more you do that, you slip down into the lower aspect of it, where potential is constant and resistance increases, so current decreases. So eventually you spend so much time feeling like crap because you need more and more drugs to be able to get less and less of a high. But all of that is keeping your potential locked in this level of potential constant, but it's not a genuine potential that you've deliberately created. It's one that you just accidentally find yourself in. And then what happens is, if you don't break that cycle, eventually the resistance gets so high that you drop out of the potential constant reality down to the resistance constant reality. And then as your ability to act to overcome the resistance gets less and less, your potential starts dropping exponentially. And then you're at the very, very bottom of the cycle here. This is the point where if you don't figure out how to break this, you are going to die, because your potential will drop so low that you will reach the point of death. And lots of people are doing this on lots of different levels. We're accidentally, inadvertently locking our potential in because we haven't found that thing, like he says, and he says it perfect. You got to find something that you want more than the drug that you are addicted to, that you are currently compulsive with. Whatever that activity is, you need to find something that you want more than whatever it is that you are compulsively pursuing. And for me, and it's a big part of how I stopped drinking, it's this project. It's the 2,600 pages on energy law that I've written over the course of the last 9 years, is me saying alcohol is going to kill you. It's destroyed every aspect of your life, but you have this thing, and luckily for me, I found it. I had this idea that if everything is energy, then energy law must be affecting everything, and I poured all of that compulsive energy that was going into drinking into this project in the writing aspect of it. And now that I've beaten the alcohol component of my life and I've stopped the compulsive writing of it too, now we're moving into the presenting phase, and now I am going to just as compulsively do this.
Well, and it's very interesting that the compulsion aspect, I'm not sure yet, and I'm sure we go on with watching more of Bradshaw, we're going to understand more of that. But it's the idea that are all compulsions bad, or are some, like, there's definitely some that are worse than others.
For sure.
The drug abuse, alcoholism, definitely those are going to destroy your life, like, even physically, mentally and physically. They're going to just break down your body. But I mean, there's many stories of where people were alcoholics and turn their life around, and they turn their compulsions from alcoholism to exercise. And then they become, fanatics at exercise and start bodybuilding. And it's definitely a healthier compulsion. But at the same time, it's still a compulsion.
Yeah, you're still not free.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that, it's more rampant an issue than what we might think. I think, as Carlin was talking about how many people are struggling with this kind of stuff in the world.
Yeah, and they just don't have something to live for. And that's why we're seeing tent cities all over the country right now of people that have just given up. Because when you make the...
Well, and their compulsions have destroyed them.
When you make the parameters for starting the game so high that the average person doesn't even know where to start, then they're naturally going to feel a sense of shame and worthlessness. And then you're just going to see this is what happens. You got a whole generation of young people that are ODing on fentanyl, because why would you take a job working the deep fryer at McDonald's when you're never going to earn enough to live?
And nobody's giving any real answers on how to face that.
And you're stuck at home living with your parents who are adult children themselves.
Dealing with their own trauma and compulsions.
And then it just trickles through all of society.
Yeah, and gets worse and worse generation after generation.
Years ago, I remember watching that clip, and it really resonated with me, him saying that if you are suffering with addiction right now, the thing you need to do more than anything else is find something that you want more than whatever it is you are compulsively trying to consume. And maybe it's media, if it's social media. You really need to do that inner searching to find that thing that is more important to you than whatever it is that's got its hooks in you.
It may not be the perfect answer, but for people that are struggling with destructive compulsation, that's at least a way out of the destructiveness. It may not be a way out of the compulsive behavior that, underlying there's some kind of a deep emotional pain you're dealing with, but at least it's a way to get out of the destructive compulsions and into one that's less destructive. And some compulsions are actually can be quite profitable, as George Carlin has shown. Some of his compulsions have led him to be one of the world's greatest comedians of all time.
I want to end this clip a little bit differently this episode, because I found this amazing short film called Nuggets, and it perfectly illustrates without any words whatsoever exactly what Carlin was describing about the process of becoming an addict. How there's this thing that is out there that you're curious about, that eventually you try and you get this great high, and then how it slowly starts manipulating you into the point where it goes from all of the energy of the excitement of the high to all of the resistance of the addiction to the high. And I want to end this one by playing this short film called Nuggets that is perfectly visualizing exactly what Carlin described in the video. If you enjoy the content here, be sure to go to Seniorthinktank.ca. There's all kinds of information there about how energy law is affecting every aspect of your life. If you see yourself in anything you've seen in this video today, be sure to keep watching so you can learn how to overcome whatever you are currently compulsively consuming. See you next week.